I'm taking some time today to have a conversation with these really, really beautiful cucumber plants. This is a student project from the plant science class at Woodland Community College, and they are testing two different groups of cucumbers. One's the control, who we do not talk to, and one is this, who we do, for about 15 minutes a week. And I've been trying to figure out what I would talk to you guys about. And I suppose you ought to know what's going on in the current time. He's growing in here. Get out of there, you. So, about the past month, there's been a nasty disease sweeping through the human population. And a lot of people say I just wonder, how could it have not happened sooner? When you have a population of 8 billion-ish relatively large animals, well, Mother Nature doesn't ever really like that. And there are usually checks and balances within any ecological system that makes sure that population doesn't continue growing at the rates that it has. So we find ourselves in these unprecedented times of having very large populations living in, high proximity or close proximity to each other, primarily as a result of capitalism. If this were a more regulated kind of financial system, of course we wouldn't live super close together because no one likes that. It's unnatural. We like space, we like fresh air, we like rolling hills and trees or whatever the hell it is that gets you off. There's exceptions, of course. I know people who love living in cities, and I think it's because they're just highly social. And then there's kind of the rest of us, and I like the idea of cities. I like visiting, I don't like staying. So recently we've been told, stay in your homes, come out, for essential things, groceries, medical appointments. I'm over here giggling because I guess I'm a little essential because I have to come in every so often and make sure that this whole thing doesn't fall in on itself. And the times are, how do I describe how I feel about it? It's so complicated. It's almost like grief, where, grief is a word and whatever, but it really fails to encapsulate the sensation of, a recent loss. And in a lot of ways, this feels like a loss. It's like another thing to kind of add to the Millennial Experience book. I was born in '86, so I guess I'm a slightly older millennial, and I was old enough to see the World Trade Center go down and the quote war on terror, and then in 2008, kind of when I was more or less getting my adult legs under me, the economy took a massive shit. I was lucky I found work at a grocery store who paid above minimum wage, so I managed to be okay, sort of, except that whole, abusive relationship I stayed in for reasons that are still not clear to me. Got out of that, got in a better one. That was good. And I went back to school in 2010, a little bit of a late bloomer, waited about 6 years after I graduated to do it, because when I was like 17, I wanted to be an artist, and I had the Art Academy or whatever the fuck it is come visit me and check out my portfolio, and they liked it, and come to find out it was like $30,000 a year, and I didn't know at the time that there were things like financial aid and programs for poor asses like me, so I just didn't go, and kind of assumed that all colleges were more or less equally expensive, which is partly true, but there are ways around it. So anyway, I went back to school in 2010 and just graduated last year in 2019. So I was there for 9 years. During that time, the economy gradually put itself back together, and I gradually put myself back together. It was a big growing period, pretty uncomfortable, but all the best growing I think people do is when they're kind of miserable and tired and stressed. Your brain always wants to find a way out of that, and mine, to some degree, kind of did. So, my last year at Davis, I had a friend who works here at Woodland Community College, and she came to my husband's birthday party over the weekend and said, "Hey, there's like this job opening where I work, and it's, mostly in a garden. It's kind of cool. Maybe you should check it out." And I was like, "Yeah, I was drunk." And I was, "Oh, that sounds good." And that following Monday, she actually followed up with me because she's a pal and was like, "No, I'm serious. Do you want me to give you the contact info?" And I said, "Shit, sure." And weirdest interview ever. Love Candy and Brandy. Or Candace and Brandy. I almost said Brandis. Candace and Brandy. And they sat around with me for a couple hours, kind of gave me the gist of what the job looks like, and hired me on as a temp. And I've been here ever since. Just got the permanent position last year. So yeah, 9 years of college, luckily debt-free, because I took my sweet time and got really good grades and accordingly really good scholarships. Of course, I racked up some credit card debt, so it's pedantic, right? Like, didn't have student debt, but hey, I've got credit card debt, sweet. And yeah, so we've been ramping up this year. We're working on, expanding the program. We want people to be involved in the food system. There's these statistics that go around. All farmers are aging out, and it's true. We're trying to dispel a lot of these notions that, working in agriculture is like farm labor, because that is but one small part of the whole thing. So I put together a new hydroponic system. I put together an aquaponics system. We have a plant conservatory. I'm learning to farm actually, which is not just, you plant once or twice a year and harvest when it comes in, but rather planting very intentionally, with the goal of, getting our department into the Woodland Farmers Market, my understanding of which is that it's very small, for a lot of reasons that I won't get into now. But yeah, now we're in this, sort of shelter in place, don't talk to anyone or don't be near people kind of phase. And we, had still been kind of working on a lot of these smaller details of getting there, like the planting's done for sure. That's, for me at least, the easy part. The hard part was learning how to put together our lists of commodities that we, are selling, or in my case, maybe selling. So I just kind of listed everything. And working out the details with our insurance to cover our asses, and getting signage and stuff. All that's on hold now. And the farmers market was supposed to start, I think, the first weekend of May. And at this point, we can't even say if the market's going to open, let alone, can we get there, because we're so behind on all these little nitty-gritty bureaucratic details that are ultimately, for the consumer's protection, which is important. So it kind of looks like it's not going to happen this year. We've also been doing this farm to school thing where the produce that I've been growing here, we have an amazing student, Daniel, who's volunteered to ferry the produce from here to our sister campus all the way out at Clear Lake. And obviously that's not happening right now either. All the schools in the state are closed, and that's a bummer. So I've got this abundance of food and am trying to figure out how I can kind of safely, put it in the mouths of people that are hungry. And that's really hard. There's some information out there about the virus, which is good. We know that it's carried in droplets of water, which, can be flung from the face of a human by up to 6 feet, and that's not cool. But hey, at least it's not measles, where the virus can float around just as a virus in the air and infect way more people. This is why you should get vaccinated, people. I don't care what you say. Killing other people for your belief systems is not a right. And rant. So we know it's carried around by droplets. We know it does display persistence on certain surfaces, the conditions of which are not clear currently, but We can generally assume like touching things isn't good. We can carry it on our hands and accordingly put it in our mucosoidal membranes, like our eyes, our mouths, our nose, and, I guess if you're a butt scratcher, your butt. And that's really hard. So if I had contracted the virus and we're in the incubation period where I'm asymptomatic, I can also still be transmitting it, and that really really sucks. It's, I think, common knowledge to most people when you're sick. You're feeling sick, you cover your cough, you cover your sneeze, you stay home, you sleep, drink water, hopefully. And in this case, what they've found is that, you can be just a viral particle shedding machine and have no fucking idea. And so that makes getting the, produce that I've been talking about to people kind of scary because, what if I am just shedding this? Or, what if I never get symptoms, but I am infected? Does that just make me a giant vector? And my ability to give a fuck about people and their well-being has really held me back from acting on that. And that sucks. Part of why I got into agriculture is because it's this really perfect nexus between taking care of the environment and taking care of people. They're inexorably tied together, and what do you do about that? You can't just choose one or the other. At least I can't. So I chose both in ag, and now I'm faced with these greater problems that ultimately really dramatically impact my ability to do both, and that's disappointing. But we can only hope that people follow this edict, that no one else that's vulnerable gets sick and dies, although I'm scared to say we've been so slow to act in this country that probably won't be the case. And, just try and hunker down and do the best we can right now. I'm gravely disappointed. A lot of this feels like, I read a lot of sci-fi, so a lot of this feels like, those kind of post-apocalyptic sci-fis, but, without the post, where things are happening now, the end. And I guess I have a bad habit of putting together things when perhaps I shouldn't, but having taken paleobiology and accordingly studied extinction, like you come to realize in all these events that have, ended a species or ended a life or ended a epic on Earth, the event doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time. And I think that kind of knowledge is part of what sort of freaks me out about this. I know that humanity has lived through multiple market fluctuations and pandemics and all that, but I often wonder, like, did it feel this way to the people who lived through it? And I assume it must have. My other concern, of course, being on the more educated side of things, you read novels, by like Naomi Klein, who, well, it's not a novel. I take that back. It's information. And what I'm specifically thinking about is the shock doctrine. Shock doctrine. And if you haven't read that by Naomi Klein, you really should, because it really gives you an unbiased glimpse into how certain political regimes, and this is across the world, this is not just, America, how these political regimes actually use the chaos involved in war and in disease outbreaks and various other conflagrations that just produce human chaos, how they manage to implement policy changes to essentially better a very small few while the little guy gets shafted. So that's the other scary thing about existing in right now. Like, clearly we're headed for a depression, but on top of that, like, it seems likely that our safety nets are going to disappear. And we've got people in government who are fighting to keep that from happening, but they're in a minority. So that's about where I am with all this. It's kind of a lot. You can't really nutshell that into 15 minutes, and that was just a broad overview of sort of where my brain's at. And yeah, looking at these poor cucumbers, though, I'm also seeing you guys have little bit of yellowing on the outside edges of your leaves, which may be calcium. You're also looking a little light on your lower leaves, maybe nitrogen. So I think after this I'll feed you.